Okay, we better let you in. When I was a child, I remember having bruises all over my legs. It seemed odd to me. And I would ask my mother, why do I have so many bruises? And she would say to me, well, you're a kid and kids get bruises. You know, you play around and you play hard and you get bruises. And that never really seemed right to me. When I was a teenager, I had extremely heavy periods. There were many days that I couldn't go to school because my periods were so bad and heavy, and I would not have been able to make it through a school day. Whenever I would talk to my mother about my periods, she was very sympathetic with me. She would say, oh, you're just like me, you've got it like me. And she thought that it was normal. I just had really bad periods. And that's what the doctor said, just heavy periods. And so I started taking birth control pills whenever I was a freshman in high school, which is very young. They did help with my bleeding. I had toxemia when Jacob was born, and I didn't know that I had bled so much until it was time to leave the hospital. Since childbirth, my periods have just continued to get heavier and heavier. After Jacob, I had high blood pressure during my pregnancy, and then it never went down, and so birth control pills weren't really an option any longer. I was fortunate to get pregnant again with my daughter, and after having her, my periods became so heavy that I couldn't leave my house for 2 to 3 days at a time. I would wear a Super Plus tampon and 2 to 3 pads, and I would change that every 20 to 45 minutes. I was very frustrated at that time and a little depressed too about it, because it was kind of starting to control my life. And so I talked with my doctor about it. The only thing that we have left to do is an ablation. I went back and forth, because when you do have an ablation, that means you're no longer fertile. Who's that? And I went to my sister's house. Sisters and their families and my nieces and nephews were all around. And I started my period, and it was one of my worst bleeds of all. I was playing with my niece in her, in her bedroom, and she was 6 years old at the time. And I stood up, and when I stood up, there was a large spot on the carpet where I'd been sitting, and it kind of scared her. I went to bed at my sister's house, and I often would sleep with a couple of towels under me, and every hour I would get up in the night to change. I slept through for 2.5 hours. And I remember jumping up out of the bed because I knew what had happened. And I lifted the towels, and there was a huge, huge, huge ring of blood on my sister's beautiful sheets, mattress. And I just felt so guilty about what had happened. And I was willing to go ahead and have the ablation so that I didn't have to worry about that sort of thing happening again. I was diagnosed with von Willebrand disease about a year ago, and it was after my son received a diagnosis of von Willebrand disease. I was relieved because I knew that what I was going through wasn't really all in my head, and that I wasn't exaggerating about my symptoms, which is often how I would feel when I would discuss them with my doctor. I also felt a little bit frustrated because nobody figured this out sooner. It had been 18 years that I was dealing with very, very severe symptoms. I just had a major operation. There was a lot of anxiety with it, but I was able to get the medication that I needed, so it wasn't a problem during surgery. I feel like I've done very well, you know, and I think a big part of that is that I had clotting factors and I had the infusions that I needed, and so I was able to get up and around. I just felt better.
Jaden got diagnosed when she was 3 years old. My husband was out of town. It was just myself and the kids at home. Jaden was asleep in her room. I had the monitors on, but I can hear gurgling coming from her. She said, "Well, she doesn't have a cold. What is that noise?" So I got up, went down the hall. I checked on her. As soon as I got in the room, there was blood all over her bed, all over her face, all over her pillow.
I'm a crocodile, and I
rushed her in my room and tried to stop the bleeding. I did it for 20 minutes, went to 30 minutes, and I said, you know, I can't get this to stop. We went to the hospital. We get there, we go to the emergency room. They take her back, and they can't stop the bleed because they don't know where it's coming from. She had lost a significant amount of blood, and she had to have a blood transfusion and 2 platelet transfusions. They figured out it was von Willebrand's type 2A. And on the 9th day is when she got released from the hospital to go home. And we had to start preparing to watch her, to make sure that she knew what was going on, how to take care of it, and this was all new to us.
being with me.
Thank you for being my friend. We've met with all of her teachers, we've met with the school nurse, we've met with the principal, so everyone that she comes in contact with at school knows, even her bus driver knows she has a bleeding disorder. She needs to sit to the front of the bus because the slightest little thing could start her to bleed. With the von Willebrand's type 2A, Jaden can just walk up and just bump her elbow or something and get a goosebump. And then she had a bruise. Ow! I'm sorry. Right, so there are times where I have to check her fingernails to make sure that there are no hangnails that she can pull when she has one there, so we'll have to clip that. So if she doesn't pull, okay, well, I will leave it for the moment, but we'll have to get it off.
It still hurts on the side.
Okay. We did have an episode where she brushed her teeth and she went to bed, and 20 minutes later, clots were coming out of her mouth. We have no idea. We went to the emergency room. They gave her the medicine. We went to see Anita the next morning, and we had no idea. All right, good job. I keep Band-Aids and Vaseline, the Amicar, and her factor. I have 2 whenever she goes to the hospital or the emergency room for whatever bleeding problem. We just put it in the bag. I keep it everywhere we are. Wherever we have to go, I've learned it has to be where we are because she's going to need it at some point in time. If Jaden should have a cut, just a little small cut, I have Vaseline on hand for her lips because her lips get dry a lot and they will crack and bleed. Jaden is allowed to do dance, like tumble, ballet, tap. She rides her bike, she rides her Barbie truck. I let her slip and slide or run and play, but even with the running and playing, I kind of watch her because she could fall. We take a special interest in her. We kind of watch what she does, whether she's walking up the steps or if she's running down the sidewalk. Jaden, slow down. Jaden, don't fall, because she can be walking up the steps and fall and bust her chin or hit her arm. So any little thing at this point could cause a bleed. But I have a great support system within my husband's family, my church members, and most definitely my husband. I will call a couple of members from my church and I'm like, Jaden's having a difficult time. I need you to pray for us. I need you to pray for her. I need strength. I said, it's kind of hard when you're by yourself, trying to get through this, and this is your child. For me, the most important thing that I would say to other moms that have daughters with bleeding disorder, constantly check your child. If they say my arm hurts or my elbows or my knees or my legs hurt, check them. Make sure there's no bruising. Make sure there's no bleeding. From time to time, just when you're up at night, go in and check on your child, because you never know what's going on within their little systems, because this just happened out of the blue. She wasn't doing anything. She was simply sleeping and started bleeding. And just listen to your child. A simple headache could be something serious. And granted, they may say I have a headache every day. Listen to them, because you just never know what it is.
What?
I have von Willebrand disease type 1, so my body doesn't make enough of von Willebrand factor. I do have a very heavy menstrual cycle, and the first time I had one was very heavy, and then a year later, in October, I had another menstrual cycle, and I just didn't stop. And I kept bleeding up until March. And it was heavy. It was a pad and a tampon an hour. There was huge clots. I mean, I bled through my clothes. I was embarrassed at school. I shut myself out from everyone. And it's just so hard. And I didn't know it wasn't normal. And because of that, I had to go to the emergency room twice. And the second time, I passed out, and I had to get 2 transfusions before they could do anything else to even test my blood, because I was just so far gone and anemic, to the point where they actually told my mother if she had brought me 3 days later, I would have died from blood loss. The transfusions delayed my diagnosis, but then 3 months later, they told us I had von Willebrand disease. The first year I was diagnosed, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was going on. And so I was very confused, and I was ashamed. And I told my friend, and then everyone at school knew, and it was a 3-foot radius from me. It was horrible. And then finally, when we moved to North Carolina, we went to a Grayland retreat with the Soar women, support, outreach, advocacy, resources for women with bleeding disorders. And they gave me a breakdown of what von Willebrand disease is. And I got to meet other girls my age with it. I got to meet girls younger than me with it, and women with it. It makes such a difference to see them, because they're strong, they're independent, and they live normal lives. And it really opened my eyes and made me realize it's no big deal. So I had to take medicine sometimes. It's not that bad. Now that I have a diagnosis, I'm not afraid to tell my teacher I need to leave the classroom if I'm not feeling well. I know it's not worth the risk. I'm not going to do this because it's going to hurt me. And the teacher can't say, no, you have to. It's really improved to the point where I'm healthier, and I have so many opportunities because of BWD, where I got to go to Arizona to go to the National Von Willebrand Disease Conference. I got to meet so many amazing people with it. I got to go to Washington, D.C. to lobby Congress to help other people with bleeding disorders. I really see more of advocacy in my life, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for me, to the point where maybe I want to be a criminal law lawyer to stand up for victims. And I'm proud to say I have von Willebrand disease, and because of that, I can be anything I want.